I want to say that I realize we have these papers technically still being published, so when I talk about them being vanished, I fully realize there's small copies floating around, okay? I'm talking about the 7-day-a-week big thick one, okay, that one, because this is what happened. Down the digital click hole, click, 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 goodbye papers, right? I make glass. This is my media life now. This photo is a project by Birmingham photographer Charity Ponter, where she photographs artists' dream selves. And so if you go to Charity, you can have yourself photographed however you like. And I really like that idea of about dreams. But it got me to thinking about my media life and what media was like in the 18th and 19th century. And that got me to thinking of how different things are today. For example, it was possible to hold things with each hand because you didn't have a cell phone in one, right? This image, and Charity is 28, this image is actually bound for a book. It's not in electronic form like you see it here today, but it's her second book. So I'm very much working with artists who believe in the print media. You know, 30 years ago, media and communication would have been very different. If I had been speaking with you, we would just be here in this room, right? And I'd like you to try to consider that possibility. We would be gathered as a group to listen to ideas, no cell phone, no internet, no 24/7 news hole or anything, just us sharing ideas. And you would be totally present here with me, and I would have the opportunity to earn your attention. And the only way we could communicate outside the room would be with phone, and that would be like have a cord phone, right? Or send a note out. And if you wanted photographs of it, I mean, you'd have to wait weeks. I just kind of want to bring that context of what communication was for thousands of years, because it's going to give you an idea of what we lost in Birmingham, Mobile, and Huntsville when we lost the paper. And you know how print media is different when you're ready to accept information, and that's why it has the bedrock for Alabama's information streams. Telling the stories of the vanishing newspapers, and yes, I said that, vanishing newspapers in Alabama is very important. It's impacted our state and workforce in a variety of ways that aren't good. You know, we've really decimated our media industry here, in my opinion. And I find this really interesting. I walked by this when I went to work at the news every day. I walked by it when I went out for lunch. I walked by it when I had meetings. And the next photograph you see of me, I'm 4 stories up from this, okay? This building now has an insurance company in it. Don't get me started, right? So, I'm sorry, I've waited to talk to this. I have some friends that say, just get it out of your system, Amy. It's been 5 years. I'm like, I want my paper back, right? So the other thing we're going to talk about is what's happened, because it's interesting. It doesn't say freedom of speech or the press as long as the advertising revenue stream can support it, or as long as the advanced publication chooses to publish it. This is technically one of our rights, correct? So our story remains an evolving one. I believe we lost irreplaceable community narratives across the state, past, present, and future, when the newspapers ceased to publish in Birmingham, Mobile, and Huntsville in 2012. But we could also be the first state, as we all are in a digital era, to figure out how to get our print back. How do we get a fundamentally reliable print narrative back into our community? Because I believe print should be one of my options for informing myself. Currently, we are swimming in a spaghetti of information streams. Our opportunity here in Alabama is to identify the important ones and figure out how to connect ourselves, inform ourselves, become a community, but also preserve our narrative for future history. Keep in mind that I'm a researcher, I'm the geeky people, right? And the first place we go is the newspaper. So 5 years ago, we stopped our narrative in Birmingham, Huntsville, and Mobile for people like me. So that's probably why I get really worked up about this. Anyway, I have always loved reading the newspaper. This is my media life 7 years ago. And it's 4 stories up from the slide I just showed you, the first amendment. And we're launching the business section. We did a lot of wonderful things in 2010, in my opinion, but we're relaunching the business section. And I left Fox 6 for one reason only. I believed in the newspaper. I saw it in the research. I knew it informed us, and I thought, I'm going to go work for the paper. And my friends at the station are like, have you lost your mind? They're dead trees. And I'm like, I really think that they reach more people than we do. So it shocks me that everyone that was in this building, all the bylines, it's gone. I mean, it's just vanished from downtown Birmingham. Alabama is the first state in the nation where this has happened. Half of our population, more than 2 million people, do not have access to a daily paper. Birmingham, Mobile, and Huntsville, it's gone. Tuscaloosa News I can see in the pig, right? So I do have access to the Tuscaloosa News in Birmingham. So in my opinion, half the population is totally uninformed 4 days of the week in terms of Birmingham, Huntsville, and Mobile, and only slightly informed the other 3, right? So by default and perhaps serendipity, Alabama is the first state in the nation to face this digital news transition without the newspapers that have formed our narratives for hundreds of years. I mean, the Birmingham News have been writing about Birmingham for 125 years when we ceased to publish it, correct? Right. So what we're going to talk about now is how important the newspaper is to the bedrock information stream in any market. And, you know, I have a lot of friends in television, and after all this happened, we would go out to lunch, and they're like, you know, we can't do the news without the paper. And I'm like, I didn't stop publishing it, right? So I wanted to talk a little bit about this. The daily newspapers in any market feed the information stream, okay? Because you've got Barnett Wright covering county, you've got the Special Master's Report being read, you've got this whole staff of people. And what happens is that the TV and radio stations, they will pick that up. Newspaper people don't like that, right? But that's what happens, and then it gets rebroadcast again. And all it does is improve the dissemination of a story. So what happens when you take your daily newspaper away? Okay, so what's coming out of your information streams now in Birmingham, Mobile, and Huntsville? And you know, it feels like that on sometimes. In the tape I had to do this, I literally had to put my husband's death on Facebook for 4 weeks to try to get the information out. So this is really what has been going on in the market. But further, I want to talk about exactly what's happened. These are statistics. I am a nerd, okay? These I felt were really important. When I look at the Bureau of Labor and Statistics database, and if you want a party, I can show you how to do it, right? 2010 to 2014, Alabama has lost editors, the people that make sure I'm right, that it's typed right, that it's correct, that we've asked the question, 15 times the national average. We have lost editors in this state at 15 times the national average, photogs at 8 times the national average. Who needs pictures? PR people at 4 times the national average. And this is really problematic, all right? PR people, let's just focus on them for just a second. The average PR person has a daily newspaper, which we don't right now, places about 10 stories a week. We lost more than 1,000 of them, but I'm going to keep it at 1,000 to keep the math easy, right? So 10,000 stories a week times 1,000 PR people we lost times 52 weeks means over 500,000 plus stories or press releases or story ideas that were never pitched. So to me, these are the stories that were never written or published in Alabama. To me, it's the business openings, you know, city scene, that kind of local business. They were just never published. So one of the days, and you know, I will say that I have 2 journalism colleagues that disagree with my conclusion about what I'm about to say, and I'll point their reasons out. But we used to circulate 103,000 Birmingham Newses on Saturday, traditionally home to high school sports information unavailable elsewhere. So I look in Scarborough data, and I'm just trying to see if this has changed anything. And we've lost 100,000 high school football fans in Birmingham over the past 4 years. I mean, high school football? Not possible. Now, Tom Ehrenberg, who is studying here, thinks he thought it was security, and my friend Cynthia Gould, who does Fighting for You at 3340, thought it was money, too much, you know, to get into the games. But I'm telling you, high school sports should be fairly consistent. You know, and the print experience is just so important. Historically, it's for any community. It's defined the spatial, geographic, political, cultural, institutional, anything that's going on in the community. I happened to find a box of party glasses, another story, right? But they were packed with this Obama wins, and I'm like, wow. Eric Velasco right here, he's writing about the race for the top court is too close to call. Have I seen any of that information in 4 years? No. And speaking of that, in 2014, Alabama's voter turnout was the lowest it had been in 28 years at 41%. Scarborough research is showing that people say they always vote in local elections. That is also declining. And I can kind of, I'm a sample of one, and I get that, but No, I don't really know what's going on in the court races. Maybe somebody else in Birmingham does. Anyway, I feel like I'm not informed because I'm not getting this. I'm not getting the content that used to come through professional journalists with a time-tested vetting process, and then it showed up on my door. My 24-year-old son says, "Why can't we get a paper delivered?" And I'm like, you know I'm working on this speech, right? You've watched me live this, right? You know I'm no longer down in that building. And what was interesting to me, too, and those of you, again, are geeks, check out the Pew Research 2016 study on media. 51% of every newspaper consumer says, keep the digital. I want it exclusively in print. Let me say that again. Half of people who consume newspaper content just want the print. Keep the digital. Okay, so it's been really interesting. And when we lost, everybody we lost, and I was in the building the day we all found out whether or not we kept our jobs, all that kind of stuff, it's like the information just kind of left. And I think that that's just really important to understand. All the institutional people, hundreds of people that knew where everything went. So this is just really kind of interesting to me. How many of you have a special paper that you save for yourself? Anybody have newspaper clippings at home? Okay, what do you do now? I mean, I don't know, you put the iPad on the wall, I'm just not really sure what happens. So we're going to do a little bit of comm theory, just a little enough to be dangerous, okay? We have 5 senses. You know what they are, we won't go through that. And they're usually used to do things like, spoken word, writing, dance, song, enjoying the sunset, what have you. And there was somebody I studied when I went to school named Marshall McLuhan, and he talked about hot and cool media. And he felt like that really was a difference. He wrote in the 60s about this. And so what's happened is a hot medium demands your central nervous system. It blinks, it stimulates, it's demanding your central nervous system. And you don't really have a choice about whether or not to participate. When Fox 6 News says, stay right there, you're like this, where print extends it through the alphabet. And in fact, historians can trace the rise of Western civilization to 3 things, right? The wheel, we got that. Paper, because carrying those stone tablets around got heavy, right? And the printing press. And that these 3 things pivotally changed the world. Okay, but we don't have the printing press in Alabama right now. It's silent, at least in my market it is. So, print is definitely a cool medium in the sense of how it engages your body biologically. And I think that that's important to make a distinction as we move forward to talk about our favorite media extension today. This is our favorite media extension today, our mobile phone. I don't know if I'm in the minority or not, but I still use a landline to find the darn thing, right? But I see this, right? And I'm like, really, we used to have 2 hands. So I want to talk about this media extension for a while. And a media extension is anything that takes you out of your present surroundings and puts you someplace you're not. We're not going to have the conversation today about whether it's actual communication. But I think it's important to understand that we love our phones. In preparing for this speech, because I use mine basically to do business and email, some of the things you can do with your cell phone via app truly shocked me. And I didn't want to know how that process would be finished, right? Fertility testing was the one I came across, and I'm like, I don't even want to know, right? So now we have everything we need to know, everything we want to see, everyone we want to talk to. We don't really care whether it's vetted as long as it makes us feel good, right? And now we carry everything around with us. And I think one of the things that gets lost in this conversation is the editorial discussion, right? Public versus private property, whether or not we can use your photo. I mean, none of that's happening to our information, and it doesn't happen on these devices. Everything comes across as looking the same, but it's not. So I have friends going, I'm just looking at the Washington Post and the New York Times, but realistically, we need a better strategy to be informed in that. This is our biggest problem. I'd never seen a $1,000 bill. I found it on the internet. I thought everyone would like to see it too. So we've all seen a $1,000 bill, right? What's happened is that there used to be a wall between advertising and journalism, a very, 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 very tough wall. We're the journalist and we're making the money, and never the two shall meet, unless this happens, right? Okay, So now what's happened is in the $60 billion that is now digital advertising that's out there to be had, it's not going to the local media. 2/3 of all digital advertising goes to the top 5 companies: Google, Yahoo, Bing, Microsoft, and Facebook. And if that's only 4, add Twitter. So the deep revenue streams that used to finance everything and keep the journalists going and send the clients on the fancy trips, all that is gone. Now what? Okay, so I think we need to figure out a way to be informed again. I'd like to propose something, and what I like to call it is collaborative journalism. What do we do now? I think that between all the technology we have, all the institutions we have, the fact that we still have the wheel, the paper, and the printing press, that we ought to be able to figure out something. And I hope that we do at some point, because the content is out there. I had lunch with my friend Barnett Wright. I don't know how many of you know Barnett. He was the one reading the Special Master's report. He wrote about the bankruptcy and everything. And he's now editor for the Birmingham Times. And he ran a story on human trafficking that I happened to see on Facebook. $159 billion human trafficking industry runs through downtown Birmingham on I-2059. I saw it on Facebook. I go to lunch with him and he says, my website crashed, my paper rolled out. I'm like, Barnett, those stories should flow over, right? I had no idea. So it's really important to understand that this content is still being generated. Barnett's publishing a paper. There are former news people publishing Alabama news centers. There are smaller papers. Why can't we reverse publish and put something out there? I mean, I really think it's incumbent upon us to find a way to get our narrative back. Now, I don't know if anybody else has the same passion for it, but I certainly do. And you know, it's really kind of interesting. My 2 passions have now intersected. Glass, and I do run a glass studio, and I am making a living doing it, yay. And media, because everything is now a glass screen. We are all glass artists. We're all communicating on a glass screen 24/7. And I think it raises the question, now that we all can participate, now that we're all global content generators on the web, exactly what do we put out there, first of all? And secondly, how do we connect to ourselves and each other in a meaningful way? And thirdly, how do we preserve it for future generations? Because print is cool media. Thank you.